Hi, I'm Jacob Lundy with the Clark-Esposito law firm PC in New York City. Following our recent publication of details on new Russia sanctions as a result of the war in Ukraine, I wanted to discuss some of the real-world impacts of these sanctions. Now, to be clear, the current sets of sanctions against Russia are unprecedented, and how these are impacting Western businesses are coming to light virtually every business day. However, we have sought in this video to go over a few of the substantial and immediate impacts that we're aware of today. In the short term, the aim of the new comprehensive sanctions against Russia are to disrupt Russia's war-making capacity. This might be referred to as the prevention component. Second, they're meant to disrupt Russia's domestic economy and to damage support for the war. This might be referred to as the punishment component. The new sanctions are, however, so far-reaching that they will affect the wider global economy. First and foremost, something that most viewers are likely to have noticed already is that Western securities markets are reeling from just the destabilizing effects of a pretty massive war in the European continent, as well as the wholesale removal of the Russian economy from the wider global economy. This in and of itself is unprecedented. We also have Russian banks, most major Russian banks, removed from Western access. In addition, the Russian central bank has been sanctioned, removing it from access to its own foreign funds. This has resulted in a number of credit ratings agencies downgrading Russian sovereign debt to junk status. Certainly, Western financial markets anticipated much of this, but the actual effects will take some time to materialize. Modern markets are a tangle of connectivity, and this is pretty much the first time in history that a major economy has been removed from the global system. Next, energy costs. This is certainly something that we in the West can understand and relate to. Energy costs across the board have already increased. While the United States is not nearly as dependent as the European Union on direct access to Russian energy reserves, keep in mind that refined petroleum products have knock-on effects. We've sanctioned in the US Russian petroleum products, which means that our product packaging and other items used from these raw materials are going to increase economy-wide. The same differential impacts between the United States and the European Union can be expected to be seen across other commodities markets as well. Whereas the United States expects increasing food costs and further systemic impacts from general disruption, Europe, where more Russian food is directly imported, will see a more notably diminished food supply. Remember that Ukraine has long since been referred to as the breadbasket of Europe. Both Russia and Ukraine are major suppliers in the global wheat market. Russian wheat will be sanctioned, whereas Ukrainian wheat will be prevented from export to protect Ukraine's domestic food supply for the war effort. Both Russia and Ukraine are also major producers of a number of vital underlying industrial materials, including palladium, iron ore, steel, uranium, and a number of industrial chemicals. Shortages of all of these will be felt across global markets and by businesses dependent on these materials. Ukraine also happens to be a major U.S. supplier of semiconductor-grade neon. In fact, 90% of the U.S. neon supply originates with Ukraine. As has been noted, while on-hand supplies may hold out for some time, the markets will have to adjust and find new supplies as the war drags on. For companies with overseas suppliers, supply chains, and whose arrangements are dependent on foreign transactions, sanctions are likely to be a bit trickier and a little harder to predict. Many Russian banks have been sanctioned directly, and a number have been removed from the SWIFT system completely. You're likely to see the impacts of this in a slowdown in transactions and settlements, especially those dependent on foreign banks. Finally, many private businesses are electing to suspend services in Russia and with Russian entities of their own accord. As the list of businesses voluntarily suspending ties with Russia continues to grow, this lends an added level of uncertainty to markets, services, and supply chains. Something that can be a little harder to predict than government-imposed sanctions are the number of businesses with massive global footprints who have elected to stop doing business with and in Russia on their own. Right now, these include Apple, Consumer Products, and Apple Pay, Visa and MasterCard, and FedEx. Certainly, this lends another level of unpredictability to global markets, services, and supply chains. Now, the uncertainty I've just described should not discourage your business from understanding the risk and getting in front of sanctions. For businesses who are concerned about determining their exposure to specific sanctions or their risk of inadvertent violations, we recommend a full review of lines of business, including suppliers, supply chains, financial institutions, and customers. For businesses engaged in exporting, an additional layer of review should be conducted for export operations and export compliance procedures. Where your company is new to such compliance obligations, or where you now have risk exposure owing to new sanctions that you had not previously had, the Clark-Esposito Law Firm PC is in an excellent position to help you navigate these risks. If you have questions about these risks, individual sanctions, or how your company can work with us to develop a compliance program, feel free to contact us at contact@clarkespositolaw.com or by telephone at 917-546-6997. Thank you.
Subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll be the first to know when we upload a new video. Check out our playlist if you want to see more of our videos, and comment below and introduce yourself. We'll see you soon.